Filthy Animals is an ecology podcast for adults. Episodes may contain strong language and graphic descriptions of natural phenomena. A more detailed list of content warnings is included in the episode description. Welcome to Filthy Animals, a sex, drugs, and ecology podcast where science educators, us, talk about the unusual adult activities of the natural world that we believe you need to know about. Every month, we'll expose you to the latest research on all the filthy topics your high school science teacher was too embarrassed to talk about. Because we have lower standards. I'm Rachel.
I'm Alan.
I'm Nicole.
Hi, Nicole.
Hi.
Hi, Nicole.
Today,
Oh, boy.
I'm here to talk to you about.
It's really got really somber in here.
Oh no, it's
You
not.
you were going full googly eyes a minute ago, and now now you just really brought it down. What are we talking about? I'm scared now.
I mean, no, it's nothing crazy. I promise. It's a very interesting topic, but it is not. Going through my notes, it's not sad.
Oh, okay.
I had to make sure. I was like, am I going to talk about something sad? I don't think there's like one kind of weird thing, but it's fine.
Sure.
I feel like you're always just 1 second away from telling us that crawfish are feeling horrible pain when they're brutally boiled alive or something.
Yeah. Well, it's not about crayfish today, so
Cool.
You're safe.
I'm
Okay.
convinced.
Yeah.
But yeah, last month, Rachel talked all about chlamydia and very boldly said, all animals have sex, which is not true. I'm here to talk to you about asexual reproduction.
Oh.
Not asexuality. Different in humans, but asexual reproduction.
Yes.
The reproduction without sex.
Yes.
Whoa.
It's in the name.
Hell yeah.
Yes. We'll talk about the disadvantages and advantages of a sexual versus asexual lifestyle. We'll talk about what it looks like in plants and what it looks like in animals, and just how common or perhaps uncommon that it is. So
Amazing.
Sweet.
it's a pretty fun one, I think. So let's talk about the disadvantages of sex first, because
Great.
I think that's fun to open with. We already know that sex can be extremely costly to an animal, whether that is spending time, resources, your life, looking for a mate, or just, fighting to protect that mate, things like that. Sex is very, very costly for animals specifically. It's not just the finding the mate, it's also courting them and like I said, defending them as well. There's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah. Honestly, I feel like both of our podcasts are a really good case study for the point you just made. We
Yes.
talked so much about how absurd the efforts the animals go through all the time for that.
Because it's fascinating. It is really interesting, like the extreme lengths that animals go through. So that is one big cost and one disadvantage of sex. And it does, like, that cost can differ between species, obviously. Some animals don't do a lot of courting and don't do any mate guarding, stuff like that. So it is different, across the whole spectrum. But it's also, there's a lot of sexual selection that goes into, being just attractive to the opposite sex in animals, which I find really interesting.
True.
My favorite example is birds.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of birds, especially males, will have extremely flashy plumage, and that will attract attention. It's going to make it harder for them to blend in and make it easier for them to become prey themselves. There's also really extreme examples of like birds of paradise that have feathers that are so big and bulky that they can't fly well or maybe even at all. So they're always, they want to be as flashy and showy as possible, but you reach a certain point where it becomes disadvantaged to do that.
Totally.
So sexual selection pressures are absolutely wild. And like you mentioned, Rachel, we've talked about that a lot.
Mm-hmm. Making your point even harder with birds, like something insane, like 90% of songbirds that have identical plumage across sexes don't actually have identical plumage, and the males still have like more showy plumage just in the UV spectrum that humans can't see. So
There you
yeah.
go.
So cool.
Which requires a definite energetic investment to like make those pretty colors.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And for other animals that can also see UV, which is most animals but us, yeah, they're still more visible and flashy.
Yeah. Very fun. Also, the largest benefit that is often talked about when it comes to sexual reproduction is the exchanging of genetic materials and, the recombination of genes.
Right.
However, this recombination of genes can, in some cases, lead to less fit offspring. Mom and dad have genes that worked really well for them, allowed them to reach an age to be able to reproduce. But when you have this random mixing of genes, and it's not always completely random, I'm simplifying stuff.
Sure.
But when you have this random mixing of genes, that can lead to genes that actually are not good for the offspring. And this is known as recombination load. It's a really well-researched area. I'm not going to dive into it right now, but it is a thing. And it's something that people are really interested in and is really, really fascinating.
What's the load? The load is just
that pressure of the randomness and mom has gene A, dad also has gene A, but it's different versions of it. And then they cross, and then you might get, especially a lot of times it's talking about homozygous, what's the word?
Heterozygous? No.
Well, yeah. So if mom and dad are both heterozygous for a gene, then you're going to get the heterozygous versions of those, possibly. And sometimes the heterozygous versions of those genes are straight up lethal, or reduce, fitness in some way.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's good to have heterogeneity in your genes, because that means you can pass on more variables in a way, but it can also be really bad because then you get these recessives that neither of the parents carried, but are now popping up in the offspring. So, and I promise I won't go super deep on the genetic stuff. I think that's really interesting, but it's also been a long time since I've really learned about it. So I'm a little rusty. We're keeping it pretty big picture in this episode. So don't be scared if you got scared about homozygous genes. We won't talk about it much more.
I do find them terrifying.
But yeah, it's interesting that one of the reasons why we have outcrossing of genes can actually be really detrimental to offspring. So even that is not a guarantee. Which brings us to the advantages of asexual reproduction. If you, a successful individual, have made it to a point where, I kind of want some babies. If you're just making a clone of yourself, you know that those babies are also going to do really well because you did really well. So one really big benefit. You're obviously not wasting all this time, resources, etc., finding a mate, courting them, etc., because you don't need a mate at all if you don't want to. Because there are some animals that will employ asexual reproduction, and plants will employ asexual reproduction, but it's not necessarily their only method. So they might do sexual and asexual reproduction, which is also really interesting. Asexual reproduction also uses less resources, but you are also able to produce offspring much more quickly, because you just kind of decide one day, hey, I'm going to have a baby, and then you just do it, which is great.
Sure.
Okay, yeah.
And it's not always literally a decision, but, again, simplifying it.
The way I'm just picturing a baby boinking into existence.
Yes.
Like Thumbelina in a little flower.
Yes. And asexual reproduction is really pretty, not common, but it has evolved many, many times throughout history. Sometimes it ends up, going out of favor for one reason or another, but it's not as uncommon as a lot of people think. So, why is sexual reproduction the, preferred method of reproduction for many plants and animals. A big reason is, this evolutionary arms race that we've talked a lot about in other episodes. Quickly changing environmental factors and pressures on an organism means that this recombination of genes can be really, really helpful. It's bringing out new things that might be helpful for their offspring to be able to survive. May or may not be helpful, but it's a matter of doing as much as you can, as quickly as you can, just to kind of stay in the race. If the environment is constantly changing around you, that means that you need to change too. If an organism can switch between asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction, they tend to choose sexual reproduction during times of stress. So if everything is going well, they just, bud off enough offspring or, produce they produce an egg themselves and just clone themselves essentially. But if they're stressed, they will search out mates.
That makes a lot of sense based on everything you've just said.
Yeah. And there's over 2,000 species of animals alone that we know of that will choose asexual reproduction. And it's extremely common in certain groups of plants. But again, lots of variety going on. So I wanted to talk about plants first, because I feel like this is kind of more familiar to people.
For sure.
And yeah, it's something you can very easily observe. There's a lot of different ways that plants employ this tactic. These are just some of them, but runners is a big one. These are essentially special stems that kind of grow out along the ground. They'll touch down away from the parent plant and grow a whole new plant beside it. But it is a clone. There's no, exchanging of genetic material happening here. Rhizomes are another big one. Kind of similar to runners. They're going to be special roots growing underground that emerge from the soil as a new plant. Budding, literally small buds on a plant that develop and grow a new plant. An example of this would be something like potato eyes.
Oh,
so that is a form of budding. It is a very special part of the plant. It's not the plant, again, it's not the plant choosing I'm going to have a baby and now this leaf becomes, a new baby. It's a special part of the plant that is capable of doing this.
Okay.
Fragmentation is a big one, really common in cactuses and succulents. I've talked about this before. Every time I see paddle cactuses, I just want to punch them. I don't know why. It's a very primal urge. I just want to punch them off because the paddles are distinct sections. And if you were to punch them off, or it gets, blown off by the wind or something, a more normal occurrence, that paddle, when it comes in contact with the ground, could grow a whole new plant.
Yeah.
Cool. So fairly common. And that one is different because it's not a special structure like the potato eyes. It's just a piece of the plant falling off and then being able to produce a whole new individual.
Yeah, this is probably super familiar to people just because people keep a lot of plants and try to reproduce them in a lot of these ways. I'm immediately picturing oh yeah, this house plant I have does the thing that you just said, or my mother of thousands really does have thousands, or my random vine I've never identified produced a runner and now there's a second plant growing in a different pot.
Yeah, absolutely. Airplane plants always have a ton of little babies on them.
Yeah.
And yeah, stuff like that. In a lot of succulent leaves, you can just rip off the leaf and put it in soil and just grow a whole new plant.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
What a crazy adaptation, and so useful.
Sure.
If the mother plant completely dies off after that, it's fine because she has 10 little clone babies around her.
Yeah.
It's great.
I have definitely plants in my collection that the mother plant is long dead, but I have descendants of just pieces of it that I saved.
Yeah, it's so cool. The final one that I wanted to just touch on real quick is the use of spores. So spores can be a method of sexual reproduction where it's essentially kind of like pollen that's being released into the air and then it comes in contact with the female part of a plant and it's being pollinized? No. Pollination occurs. But there are some spores that are actually an asexual method of just everything that plant needs to grow a whole new plant is in those individual s'mores. Spores. Mosses. There are some mosses that reproduce this way. Those spores have all the genetic material that they need to, they just hit a tree and then more new moss comes up. So
Yeah. Okay. Yes, this is flashing back to me because I remember taking one of my like basic biology college classes where wrapping my head around this was really difficult because I was like, what spores, like either they're basically reproductive like sexual genes or they're a total egg, and I don't understand where the difference is or how you know there's a difference, or like why are plants producing both of them in different times. And
it's wild.
There's a lot to parse out. Yeah.
Yeah, mosses and lichens are very complicated. They seem very simple, but they're not.
Right.
Misleading.
Yes.
Is it complicated only because it's different from us, though?
I mean, yeah, probably.
It's not that complicated.
They have some fun names, though. I don't remember what they are.
Well, why did you even bring it up?
Because, like, when I was researching this, I was like, oh, like you said, like, I vaguely remember learning this at some point in my life. It's all gone. But, like, once I saw the word, I was like, ooh, yeah, that's a thing I knew at one point. But I didn't write it down. But I did write down a couple specific examples of asexual reproduction in plants that I thought were interesting.
Okay.
The first one is bananas. So...
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Do you know?
So no. I guess I'm immediately confused because my perception of bananas was that they are so cultivated that they have to only be grafted. But that's not something in my mind that the plants are doing. That's like people imposing that upon them. So I have no idea what you're going to talk about.
Are we talking about like the wild banana? Like
So we'll talk about
the kind of banana that
cultivated.
has the seeds in it.
Yeah. We'll talk about cultivated and wild bananas because they are different. Because bananas are fruit,
Yeah.
which, like, by normal definitions, fruit have seed in them and they get eaten, and then the seeds get pooped out somewhere else, and that's how they're reproducing and spreading.
Right.
But with commercially farmed bananas, they reproduce entirely through asexual means. They use underground rhizomes to produce new plants, as well as grafting and stuff like that. And the fruit do not need pollination to be produced. There is no pollination that is happening whatsoever, and it's still able to produce fruit.
How?
Bananas are weird.
There are like self-pollinating flowers, right? Like there are flowers that never open. I can't remember. There's a word for it. It's like cleistogamous, something like that. But like flowers that never actually open. Like they're just in there sort of like shaking up themselves and then, making a cocktail of themselves. And then that's what, you know what I mean? And then and then fruiting that way. Is this what bananas are doing? Or
No, there is no pollination at all happening with cultivated bananas. Okay. And that is different than wild bananas, which produce flowers that need pollination in order for the fruit to be produced.
Why would...
Very selective breeding.
God, okay. Yeah, super interesting. I guess I didn't realize it makes sense they produce by rhizomes, but I did not realize they did that.
Yeah, I had no idea.
I thought it was all grafting like apple trees.
And banana trees aren't technically trees. They are like woody-ish, but they're not woody.
Right, they're one of those weird tropical plants that's like palm trees. They're not a palm tree, but
yeah. They're
like
weird.
that. Yeah.
That's all I know about bananas. So, and I'll take other questions and make up answers, but that's all I got.
How does it know when it's time to be a banana and not a flower?
It just feels the time is right.
Does it have a flower?
Banana flowers are a thing. I feel like that's a thing like in cuisine. Banana flowers.
Ooh, are they edible?
I don't know.
Do you think those are like cultivated bananas or like wild bananas though?
I don't know. I've only seen one actual real banana plant
Wow.
in my life.
Really?
Yes.
Where?
In the greenhouse at Greenways.
Nice.
It's the only place I've ever seen bananas being cultivated.
Yeah, I've only ever seen them in greenhouses also.
Interesting. My grandparents had a neighbor who had a banana tree in their front yard.
Oh.
In
Really?
Missouri. Yeah.
I didn't realize I didn't think our climate would support that.
Yeah.
But, huh.
I feel like they would put plastic over. I don't know how it worked, to be honest.
Well, I know you can grow like tropical fruits in containers and like just move them inside.
Yeah,
Here, but
that's true. Bananas are big though.
Bananas do be big.
And it was like in the ground.
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't feel qualified to tell you how they managed to keep that alive, but it's a thing that I think I saw.
Amazing. Beautiful. But yeah, wild that the commercial, cultivated variety undergoes completely different methods of reproduction than the wild variety.
Yeah, that is interesting.
I mean, makes sense. It's a tremendous amount of genetic engineering there. So
Yes. Yeah.
yes, it's really a shadow of its former self. No, seriously, like
Yeah.
they have
No,
almost nothing in, like morphologically in common. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
No, absolutely.
This is why people who are against GMOs, I find this to be a much more like complicated and like, do you really understand? Because like bananas are all 100. I mean, everything is like genetically modified in some way or another. It's like, where do you draw the line?
Yeah.
Well, in like the brassica family, where there's like one plant that makes like 8 different
Oh yeah.
plants that we eat.
Right.
Yeah.
Like 8's probably an understatement.
Yeah.
Like the brassica
There's a
family is a huge section of the produce section of the grocery store.
God, yeah. Brussels sprouts,
Yeah.
cauliflower,
Kohlrabi,
It's all from the same species.
mustard greens.
same species, all genetically engineered into different parts of the plant being favored.
Yeah. Super cool.
Nicole, you said you had a second insane example
Yes.
for us.
I have another example of some plants doing weird stuff called apomixis.
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 That sounds. Never mind. Keep going.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So it literally just means away from mixing. So another method of asexual seed formation specifically.
Apomixis.
What?
APOMIXYS.
IS.
Dang it.
So close.
Oh man.
So
I'm
close.
out.
But yeah, some plants are capable of producing seeds without fertilization. It's not super common, but it does exist. But this often includes plants that replace the seed with a little plantlet or replace the flowers with what's called bulbils.
Bulbils.
Yes. So it can be kind of an umbrella term, I guess.
Okay.
So an example of a plantlet is Poa alpina, which is one of my favorite grasses, also known as the alpine meadowgrass. Very, very cute grass. It's like purple and just like gorgeous.
Oh.
And it grows in extremely harsh conditions, like in like steppe mountain areas. And it is capable of producing sexually or by producing little plantlets that begin growing on the mother plant, kind of where you would expect like the flowers and the inflorescences to be.
Oh.
And those plantlets will even start photosynthesizing themselves while they're still attached to the mother plant. So they kind of start purple and then the base of them will turn green so that they can start photosynthesis.
Huh.
And they will fall off, become an entirely new plant afterwards.
So they don't produce a flower at all. They produce the plantlets in place of a flower.
Essentially, yeah.
So it's kind of like a grass spider plant, but they skip the flower stage altogether.
Yeah. And they can reproduce sexually, and they will sometimes. But a lot of times they're just producing these cute little plantlets, and they almost look like little purple green beans. Like they're really cute looking.
Little purple green beans.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Because like the same structure anatomically would turn into a flower versus a plantlet, right?
Yes. Well,
Like it comes from they're basically starting at like the same point, and then it just sort of assesses like, okay, it's like I need help with this. I'm gonna open up a flower versus I'm awesome, and I'm just gonna blast some of myself off.
yeah, that's a big part of it is, are there a lot of stressors right now? Okay, I'm going to do sexual reproduction.
Yeah.
If there's not, I'm doing really well. I'm not going to mess this up. I'm not going to bother with random chance and recombination and all this stuff. I'm just going to make a clone of myself.
Right.
But it's a bit more like with the plantlets, it's more in depth than just like budding or some of these other ones that we mentioned.
Right. Oh, I was just asking, like, are the same basal cells there either becoming a plantlet or a flower? Like, are they the same
Gotcha.
thing? And it just like decides like we're gonna do this with this,
Like
instead.
a stem cell situation.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. So if it's literally replacing the flower, those are the bulbils. An example of that is actually garlic.
Oh.
Oh.
So garlic will bolt upwards at the end of its life cycle, like we think of a lot of other like herbs and things. They'll bolt, produce a flower. But instead of making a flower, garlic puts on kind of like a little pouch with a bunch of bulbils inside. It kind of almost looks like the garlic cloves that grow underground and that people use like in cooking. And that it's like lots of little tiny things kind of smushed together. They are technically edible. Some people insist that the bulbils are actually like better than the cloves. Some people say they're disgusting. So I've never had them, at least not to my knowledge.
Interesting.
But yeah, it is, replacing the flour. Some other examples are going to be some onions, agaves, lilies, and kalanchoe.
What's
That all have it's a type of succulent.
Okay.
Yeah, really common actually in like if you keep succulents, you probably have a kalanchoe.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't think of any other common names for it, but yeah, it's like spiky.
Spiky boy.
Yeah.
Okay.
All bulbils are bulbs, but not all bulbs are bulbils. So it's kind of
Oh my God.
Faster.
No. Yeah, it's kind of like the frog toad situation and like some other examples.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it is different than a bulb, but it is a type of bulb. So,
okay.
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
The word bulbil was not in my vocabulary 5 minutes ago, so I'm just trying to keep up.
Yeah. I gotta be honest. This might reveal some stupidity on my part, but I've like never even tried to grow garlic or anything like that. And I've absolutely seen garlics and wild onions and stuff that have those bulbils in the top.
Yeah.
And my stupid brain was like, oh, so that's the part you harvest
Oh.
Right, yeah.
from the garlic.
Like,
Because it looks like
it
a
does.
looks like a
looks
little
very
clove.
similar. Yeah.
And so whenever I've seen that, I've just been like, oh, it's just not the type of garlic I buy at the store. It's a different garlic, and that's why it looks weird.
Yeah, I think it is specifically like the hard-stemmed garlics that have the bulbils, but I could be wrong on that. Or at least it's the hard-stemmed garlics that people really like the bulbils on. But yeah, it's the clove that you normally use, like if you go to the store and buy garlic, it's the clove underground that you're buying.
Right.
Not the bulbil up top.
That's so interesting. I did not realize they were separate things. Well, because I've pulled them apart and played with the bulbils before, and they look like little cloves of garlic.
Yeah, or like little like clusters of seeds, which essentially they are. Like all those little bulbils will make a new plant. So,
wild.
Yeah.
So is that a seed or why is it?
It's not a seed. It's a bulbil.
Oh, I don't understand. But it's like basically a seed. What is a seed except like an egg that's a plant? Like it's like a plant version of an egg. So like what is a bulbil? Like it's a clone? It's a clone packet. It's a clone egg.
Yes.
Is it like the spores? It's like a spore situation.
Or like
oh no.
or
it's
like a
is it a
bud
seed
or-
reproduction?
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
I don't know what's
seeds
happening.
need a period of inactivity before they're going to sprout. And they need light and they need all these other things. But
Sure.
like bulbils and buds and fragmentation and all these other things, basically that plant is ready to go. So as soon as it comes in contact with the ground, it's going to start growing. That is not the case with seeds.
Well,
At least
No,
most of the time.
it is okay. Yeah, it is a
And there's no
potentially.
scarification that's happening.
It is like a
it's
natal
ready.
plant. It's
Yeah.
like and it's gonna.
Yes.
Okay.
okay. Sorry, my brain just went like, oh, it's like a marsupial.
So it's like skipped. It skipped the whole stage of being a seed.
Yes.
And it sort of germinated itself on itself,
Kind of, yeah.
but
not ever actually being a seed.
So
Yes, it
it
was
wasn't
never a seed.
germinated.
Never a seed. It was just I'm growing part of myself.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let this part go, and then it's gonna be myself also in another location.
That's sick.
Nature's neat.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
I like garlic. Here's a question.
Yes.
These clonal colonies, like you can have clonal colonies of
Yes.
plants, right? That become massive. Like when we think about, like I'm thinking of, you look at forests in the American West and in the Northwest, extremely or comparatively low diversity of trees. Like
Pando, the largest clonal organism.
the what now?
Pando.
Pando.
It's a birch tree colony that's all one giant clone organism.
Right, that's what I was gonna say. It's like birches or quaking aspens or something, right?
Yeah.
Where
Quaking
they're like,
aspens.
where they're like you were looking at, if you're looking at a forest,
Mm-hmm.
like in Colorado or something, of these trees, you are looking at literally the same tree
Yes.
that has cloned itself tens of thousands of times.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So fun.
That's crazy.
That's crazy.
There's probably grasslands like that too, because
Oh, yeah.
like, I mean, all the blue stems are clonally reproducing too. So if you see like a bunch of clumps of little blue stem, they might all be clones of one original plant.
Very fun.
That is fascinating. Okay. Sorry, I'll let you keep.
I love
talk.
the confidence of a plant to be like, I'm the best. I just need
Yeah.
more of me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
But I mean, like, if it's doing that, especially if it's a plant that can sexually reproduce, but it's just asexually reproducing because everything's going fine, then all the data suggests that, yeah, it is the best. Like, it might as well just save a lot of energy and just, copy itself.
Yeah.
That's,
might as well.
yeah.
One downside being, if like disease or some new environmental factors, brought into that environment, if that one parent plant was not good at surviving that, the whole population could be wiped out.
Sure.
Can't keep up. Well, and also like when something reproduces asexually, like is it necessarily an exact copy, or can there be potentially like deleterious kind of mutations that would happen and cause like, oh, I've now screwed up the whole thing.
Yeah.
And now every clone of me is a little bit worse.
Oh my God, you're smiling like there's a really fun
So
answer.
there is a really fun answer. We'll get to it here in a second, because asexual reproduction does not always end in clones. It often does, but not always.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sick.
Gotcha.
So good stuff.
Good eyebrow wiggle.
Thank you. But yeah, let's move away from plants. Let's talk about animals. In animals, asexual reproduction is a lot of times kind of lumped under the umbrella of parthenogenesis. There's a lot of sub stuff under parthenogenesis. We're just going to call it all parthenogenesis because that's easier.
Okay. Done.
Don't come at me.
Yes. I will say this is something that I just don't get.
Yeah.
Like I get it. I know it. But I just don't get it.
It's wild.
It's really
And
weird.
it looks way different in different kinds of animals.
Yeah.
And that adds a whole new layer of complexity.
Yes.
Yes. Like turkey immaculate conception.
Yes. do we or you're probably going to explain what parthenogenesis is, like define it.
Virgin origin or virgin birth.
Virgin birth in animals. Yes.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah.
Yes.
And again, extremely variable. We'll talk about some of them. I cannot possibly cover all of them. I just picked some of my favorites because there's a lot of different examples. Again, over 2,000 species of animals that we know of, because who knows how often this is actually happening. And we just, because the only like way to tell, especially with animals that are moving around and with some of the other stuff that we'll talk about later, like the only way you can tell would be genetic testing. And that's very time consuming and extremely expensive. So
Yeah.
unclear as to exactly how common it is.
Well, like wasn't the thing with turkeys that was discovered fairly recently, right?
A lot of this was discovered very recently.
Because it was only like turkeys in captivity or something, or turkeys that were like being raised in
Yeah, they were
livestock.
in specific conditions. And so like there were hypotheses. And then when I looked into this, and you might tell me something different, but it looked like basically because they didn't have access to a man or whatever, they reproduced asexually.
Yeah.
Which also, I mean, can I just say, does make sense, but also kind of stinks of like that human thing that biologists have done, which is to totally misinterpret what's happening in the natural world and also put like a weird importance on men and just, a very, very human perspective.
Absolutely.
Obviously, these turkeys would prefer to have a man.
Of course. But parthenogenesis, just to give us like a quick overview of what it looks like, more common in kind of more basic animals. So lots of insects do weird stuff where they could have a mate, could not have a mate. Common in quotations, because again, in general, asexual reproduction is not super common, but more common in lizards, even like fairly complex lizards like Komodo dragons will reproduce through parthenogenesis. Sedgwick County Zoo had a really famous example of a single, female Komodo that just suddenly had like 3 or 4 babies just out of the blue because she felt like it, I guess. Which, girl power, love it.
That's a real testament to to good animal husbandry.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
If they're just like, great, there's
so much food. I'm so comfy.
I'm so well
here.
taken care of.
Yeah.
Here's 4 more of me.
Yeah, good luck. Yes, absolutely. And there's some really weird other lizards, like the whiptail lizards. There's several species of whiptails that are show parthenogenesis, and one species in particular that is entirely female. There's no males to be found. And so they are producing not clones. They are a very unique one in that they will actually do the recombination themselves. So there's a lot of genetic diversity in whiptails, even though there's no males around. So again, I don't know all the nitty gritty stuff of it, but they essentially carry twice as many chromosomes, mix them themselves, produce an egg, and have offspring that way.
That's insane.
Yeah. Absolutely wild. So again, not always clones. There is some really weird examples where, I'm sure the genetic diversity isn't quite as high as other lizards, but it is there. Yes.
Don't rusty crayfish also do this?
I am not 100% sure. I cannot remember.
I just had to bring crayfish into it because you confidently said we wouldn't talk about them.
I mean, I didn't bring them up.
Okay.
But yeah, I love that they still have, the genetically diverse offspring. No boys needed.
Yeah.
Who cares about them?
That's crazy.
And what's really weird is that this is I don't know why I didn't write down the species, but this particular species is actually a hybrid, which a lot of times hybrid animals are infertile.
Yeah.
But this species was like, oops, we're all ladies. Guess we'll just figure it out.
Hyper fertile.
Yeah. Super weird.
Insane.
There's a lot of research on them, but again, I didn't want to dive too deep on any particular species. Mourning geckos are another example of a lizard where most of them are female, and actually there's a lot of lizards like this where most of them are female and the males tend to be infertile. So if there are males, they're still not giving any genetic material to the population as a whole.
Holy shit,
Yeah.
That's cool.
Interesting. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Lady mourning geckos will also hump each other to induce laying eggs. So
Okay.
yeah. If you just have one mourning gecko by herself, she probably won't lay eggs. But you get 2 ladies together, eggs for days.
These are the ones that are common in captivity, right?
Yeah.
I think that my brother's mother-in-law has them.
Yeah.
And they do lay a lot of eggs. I wonder if she realizes
But they're all lesbians.
having lesbian sex.
Yep.
Cute.
Aw.
Aww.
Yeah, little
them.
lesbian lizards. I love them.
Yeah.
They're very cool. But yeah, they're really fun little geckos. Some animals will even specifically use sperm to induce the formation of the egg, but they are not using any of the genetic material to produce the egg itself. So they still need the males in the population and they need the sperm to come in contact with the egg, but they're not using that genetic material at all.
Interesting.
Just to stimulate the development,
Yep.
the cellular division there or something. Yeah.
This has been found in ants, fish, and a species of salamander as well.
Okay.
Not similar animals.
Nope.
No.
At all. Yeah.
That's wild. That's
Yeah. The number of times this sort of thing convergently evolves is
Yeah, it's all over the
strange.
place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sex is overrated.
Is that the takeaway?
Yes.
Okay. Felt like that was the takeaway.
Yeah. But yeah, so like you said, lots of different varieties. Some insect examples, because I can't not do a couple insect examples. Aphids are super weird. They will produce primarily asexually and switch to sexual reproduction as needed, which is generally going to be in the fall. And they're moving around a lot more as kind of like a last hurrah before winter. Just spreading all that genetic material real quick, and then, all dying off. So
Sure.
Good job, aphids.
Good job.
Soybean aphids and alfalfa snout beetles are two crop pests, like major crop pests, that produce almost entirely asexually, which is very unfortunate for farmers.
Yeah.
You can have just a couple of them and they'll do just fine. Hymenoptera, so ants, bees, and wasps, do usually reproduce sexually, but unfertilized eggs produced by females will hatch to be males. So this is when we get into weird genetic stuff that, again, I don't want to dive into. But if you're interested, it's called haplodiploid. So really weird stuff going on there. And yeah, so unfertilized egg, male, fertilized egg, female.
Right. Okay. Yes. And is that across many kinds of bees and wasps? Because that's how honeybees are, I know for sure. But that is a general thing about Hymenoptera.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Not all of them, but most of them.
A lot of them.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Ooh, okay, hang on. Is this like a biological timer where it's like, oh no, I'm running out of sperm, so I guess I just have to accidentally produce a bunch of drones who are going to go fertilize a new queen so that somebody else can start a new colony? Or am I just completely off base? Because if they're producing drones, they don't just, like, that hive doesn't die off.
Not necessarily.
Fertilized is female, unfertilized
male. Yes. And so, like, we've talked about this before, where, like, the bees are making a conscious decision of this.
Yeah.
So somehow, I don't understand how, but somehow they are doing this.
Sperm storage.
Yeah.
I mean, new topic coming soon.
Yeah.
But, if we have a bee hotel in your backyard, each one of those little bamboo poles or whatever you're using will be packed full of, like, multiple cells of babies. The ones in the back of the cells are females. The ones towards the front are males. So the males are emerging first and ready to mate by the time the females emerge. So she can flip back and forth. It's not just like running out of sperm.
Okay.
So it is more complicated than that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
There are also some animals that reproduce sexually, but only produce females when it is an unfertilized egg. So just because it's unfertilized, depending on the animal, it's either a male or a female because they're undergoing parthenogenesis in that example. So weird. I almost didn't include this, but I think it's really fun. Wolbachia is a bacteria.
Okay.
And it can induce parthenogenesis in a lot of different wasps. Specifically, a lot of parasitic wasps have been known to, whenever they get infected with this bacteria, will switch to parthenogenesis because of the bacteria.
Why?
Yeah, and it's in a bunch of the different insects, but this leads to a generation of all females, and Wolbachia just in general just messes up reproductive abilities of animals, especially invertebrates, really, really bad. Worth looking up. It's wild. Specifically a like real world example of something that benefits humans because, we're we like those kinds of things. Infected mosquitoes are actually being used, like right now, to treat mosquito-borne illnesses such as Zika and dengue. Infected males are released, and when they mate with wild females, the produced eggs are infertile. So, yeah, it's really weird. So it's not like, like I mentioned with the wasps, it just makes them have a generation of all females. But for the mosquitoes, it makes those eggs completely infertile whenever that bacteria is present. So, and it is sexually transmitted to the females in this case.
Right.
Yeah.
That is like, because I know it's been discussed before about like targeted eradication of very particular species of mosquitoes that are responsible for mosquito-borne illness. So that's the way they're doing it, huh?
Yeah, at least one of the ways. Because I've also heard they're releasing infertile males, but I think that what they meant was the Wolbachia infections, and they just didn't want to.
It's just being simplified.
It's being oversimplified, which in that case I think is too much of a simplification. I think it's interesting and important to notice that it's not the males being infertile; it's the produced offspring of the next generation.
Right.
Which is wild.
What fun mosquito biological warfare we've initiated.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Have they considered giving mosquitoes chlamydia?
I don't know.
Is there mosquito chlamydia?
Great question.
I have no idea.
What's the most basic organism that chlamydia can infect?
How dare you call mosquitoes basic?
I mean, compared to like...
They're pretty complex organisms,
Oh,
Nicole.
for sure. I love mosquitoes. I think they're super cool. They're pollinators. Like, they're great.
Sure.
Most basic organism, dolphin.
Whoa.
Okay.
Whoa.
I mean, look at them. They're pretty basic.
Wow. Okay.
There's
Anyways.
like a smooth thing. It's like a smooth tube.
Little tube.
Okay. Let's move on to birds.
Yay!
Birds.
Birds.
There are quite a few different species of domestic birds that have been shown to be examples of parthenogenesis, including chickens, quail, turkey. Chinese painted quail in particular have a lot of research on them and can be like actively selected for parthenogenous traits, including rising of rates of over like 50% of eggs produced are asexually produced, which is like extremely high. Like we think of, with turkeys and chickens, like it's fairly rare, but for these quail, it can be surprisingly common.
Does it not produce male quail?
So I can't remember. I want to say yes, that with birds, when they're reproducing asexually, they are going to be males. But I don't know if it's all birds.
Yeah, that's
But
what I didn't
usually
know
it is.
either. Okay. Because if 50% of the quail are being, you wouldn't want more than 50% of the birds being all male.
Yeah, for sure. And this is like humans selecting for this. This is not a natural.
Right.
Yeah, they're a domestic species. So it's humans selecting for that parthenogenic trait and producing quail.
Why? But why?
Because humans are weird.
Like with domestic birds, we like having a lot of females because eggs.
Yeah.
It's like most of the reason why people keep birds that aren't pets,
Yeah.
Huh.
Unless you're trying to sell show birds.
Oh.
And you want flashy looking males.
Yeah, true.
Okay, that's a good
So
point.
then it's like, oh yeah.
Yeah. There's also just a lot of like study on parthenogenesis in general, like with these quail. So a lot of times they're being bred to high rates of parthenogenesis because we want to study that portion of their life cycle.
Okay.
So
it's just dicking around.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you guys, I assume you guys have looked into like pigeon breeding.
Oh, yeah.
What the things
Wild.
that they will turn pigeons into.
Yeah.
Just for shits and giggles.
Yeah.
Just complete monstrosity.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah. Poor pigeons.
I mean, yeah, I guess. Ooh,
I really feel for the ones that have feathers all over their toes and are stepping in their own feces all the time. If any of those birds had chlamydia.
Ooh, they'll never be free of it.
Never. Never.
For sure. There has also been an example of zebra finches developing an egg through parthenogenesis, but that egg did not hatch.
Okay.
Which, for animals that don't normally undergo parthenogenesis, that's a pretty common outcome, is that the offspring are not viable. Whether that's like the eggs never hatch, they die earlier than expected. Once they are alive, or a whole host of other things could go wrong.
Sure.
Just because that animal has not evolved parthenogenesis for a long enough period of time to like perfect it.
Sure.
Gotcha.
So in all of these cases, when they are noting it as parthenogenesis and not like an unfertilized egg, because they are seeing some fetal growth inside the egg. Yeah.
Yes. However, one thing that I noticed with the Chinese painted quail in particular, some of the studies, like there's more recent studies that point out that it might be even more common than we realize in birds because the eggs develop differently when they're undergoing parthenogenesis. So the early like stages of development look like an unfertilized egg and look like nothing is growing. So people might be like, tossing those eggs assuming that they're duds when actually there is an embryo developing in it.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And like everybody who's raising birds like candles them and has like the stages all figured out and disposes
to like
of them.
the day.
Yeah.
Really specific.
Oh, that's so interesting. Ooh, that's like Pandora's box of parthenogenic birds. That's so cool.
Yeah. So fun. A really, really famous example of parthenogenesis in birds happened in 2021. Looking at really, really old data for California condor genetics.
Oh, no.
And they found 2 male condors that were successfully hatched, reached adulthood, that, there was no genetic material from any known male within those birds. So assumed parthenogenesis. And we have so much like old genetic data on so many birds that it's like how much of how much of it is just a lack of looking versus like it just not existing.
Right. Yeah. Oh
true.
my God, that's so cool. Yeah. Holy shit.
I will say both of those condors did not survive long enough in order to reproduce themselves. One died at like 2 years old and one did survive for several years but never had any offspring. So possible, I mean, it's a sample size of 2, which is not very big, but it's possible that there might be some reduction of
fitness
whenever parthenogenesis is happening with condors. But
Gotcha.
Fascinating. Just to explain for the people at home, the reason why the birds turn out male with parthenogenesis is because their sex chromosomes are different. Like humans have XY, and if it's 2 X's, it's a female, etc. With birds, they have Z's and W's, and it's like there's 3 of them, and so it's just like the way that it works out when it's recombining with a female, it always has to be male. Yeah.
And same like with the bees, it's like a weird, I don't know. It's not sex chromosomes, but it's weird. So we know that parthenogenesis exists heavily in plants, heavily in arthropods, in birds, and all these different animals. Where does that leave mammals?
Great
Is
question.
this something that could exist in mammals? What do you guys think?
My instinct says yes.
Yeah? Okay.
Because of the way you asked this question.
Fair.
But I'm struggling to think of where this would have possibly been observed.
Yeah, like in what animal? Like it has to happen in some. Like there's a lot of weird mammals out there. So even if it's not common,
is it happening in like monotremes, like egg-laying mammals?
What do eggs have to be involved?
I don't know, but
Yeah,
could it be? Like I mean, they're a very primitive mammal.
Yeah.
They're in some ways, like halfway to being reptile.
Yeah.
So like
Okay, but like, are we approaching this from the wrong train of thought, which is that like it's a primitive feature and therefore like more advanced animals can't have, like what if a bunch of them do, we're just idiots and we've never looked for it.
Whales are just
whales.
I mean, there's a lot of sea creatures that do it. So.
They're just swimming around and just chucking other whales out.
I don't know if whales do.
Okay,
I did not come across it.
Those are my 2 guesses.
I love it.
Whales and monotremes.
Yes.
The most primitive mammals.
Yes.
So I will say there has been exactly one documented case of parthenogenesis in mammals.
Okay.
It was a house mouse.
Oh my God. Oh my
And
God.
it was extremely genetically modified and would never happen naturally.
Sure. Yeah, that tracks.
Yeah.
Dang it.
It was a 2022 paper. extremely artificial process.
Man, that's disappointing.
I know, it is. But mammals are unique, and it's very unlikely for parthenogenesis to develop in mammals for a couple different reasons. One, mammals that we know of right now just cannot exist missing half their chromosomes like some other animals can.
Oh, true.
Just can't. It leads to fetal abortion, all sorts of like really nasty stuff if you're missing too many chromosomes.
Right.
And they also, you know, mammals have not figured out a way like some other animals to just double your own chromosomes and do your own recombination. That'd be really cool if we did. Haven't figured it out like the whiptails, unfortunately. Mammals, and this is a big one, mammals are also constrained by what is called genomic imprinting. Is this a term that either of you are familiar with?
No. Is this like an epigenetics thing?
I'll just explain it. It is not something that I had never heard of this, but it's really interesting. I'm not going to guarantee that I have a full grasp of it, but essentially different genes are expressed or masked based on a parent of origin. So a lack of paternal DNA can mean will mean a lack, like an over or an under expression of different genes that can be essential to life. So there is, you know, imprinting on our genes as mammals that, like, if you do not have a paternal set of DNA, like that egg just will not develop. Like it will not even start the process of life and development.
Interesting.
So yeah, it's a really, I read like 3 different papers on it. I didn't really fully grasp it, but it's a very like essential part of being a mammal, to the point where it's extremely unlikely for parthenogenesis to ever happen naturally.
That's so interesting. How did that happen? How did that become a mammal trait? That must be so basal.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And like with that mouse that I mentioned earlier, what they did for that female was they kept her genes intact with the female, like the maternal imprinting, and they gave her another set of genetics that were completely unimprinted. And so that's how she was able to produce offspring that were viable. I don't know how they removed the genetic markers. It's a lot. I don't understand how they did it, but that's how they did it. They just completely removed the markers from one set and let her use her own genetics. And
that does sound like epigenetics. I'm not sure like how, I'm not informed enough about that topic, but like the idea that your genes can be expressed or not expressed based on environmental factors or parental factors, that sort of thing.
Right.
Like it's just like your DNA is folded up in a weird way. Maybe they just, Wow. Weird.
Yeah.
Super weird.
Yeah. Agreed.
Oh, I'm so sorry. My brain just did something real stupid where I was like, okay, if it is like epigenetics and it is like informed by your environment and that changes the expression of your genes, etc., what if the early mammals that survived the meteor all have meteor-based genetic trauma, and that's how they survived the dinosaurs?
Yeah, interesting.
It's all written into their DNA.
Yeah.
Wow.
Put that
Makes
in the
you think.
hypothesis folder. Yeah, that's
Who knows? But yeah, the weird processes behind asexual reproduction are extremely vast. I only touched the very tip of the iceberg in this episode. It's tickled the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of weird stuff happening out there, but it's a nice little trick to have in your back pocket. Just like, I'm already perfect, just pop off another one of me, and can be the primary or only method of reproduction for various different plants and animals. It is, considered the basal form of reproduction. The most basic organisms that exist today, are splitting by meiosis and all this good stuff and just creating little copies of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Less than 1% of animals or plants are known to reproduce this way, but that doesn't mean it's not worth studying and appreciating. It's very fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sex isn't the end all be all of life.
Yeah.
True. Sex is overrated. Clone yourself instead.
Yeah.
Yes.
The ultimate answer.
Yeah. I was when you were talking about like this this male dominated scientific, like, oh well, don't you need to have shouldn't there be a man involved here somewhere? And it's like we were watching this documentary about Martha Stewart,
Oh no.
who is like an incredibly accomplished individual, but being that she is a woman, is fields questions that other billionaires don't, like, aren't you missing something in your life? Like, don't you wish you had a husband? It's like, no, I don't think she does. Yeah. I think Martha Stewart will probably clone herself. I think if she wanted to have a kid around, I think she'd clone herself.
I love that for her.
Yeah. Anyway, neither here nor there. Nicole.
Yes.
That whole episode was honestly delightful. I'm not really even going to ask you for any brain bleach, because this is just a fascinating. This is a topic where it's like, okay, the more you learn about it, the more it's like, damn, nature is just really weird.
Yeah.
There's no always in nature. It's deeply strange and perplexing.
Yes.
Just let it take you away.
Yes.
Down the rabbit hole we go. Do you have anything else you'd like to say?
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Filthy Animals. This podcast is produced by GrasslandGroupies, dedicated to spreading scientific literacy in the interest of preserving, asexually, our favorite natural resources. I don't know. On this filthy planet, send us fan mail at 4925 South Broadway, number 69. Yeah, it's funny because it's the funny number. Wichita, Kansas, 67216. Other social media and contact info is in the notes. I don't know. Just go out there, take a walk, and just think about how goddamn weird it is to be on this planet.
Yeah.
We love you guys.
Oh. I mean, yeah, that's true.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.